Mama, explain this book to me right now.
Victor, my son, let me explain.
That book is lies. Ask your wife who wrote it. Every page is stamped by the bank, Mama. Tell him the truth today.
I only wanted to help this family survive.
You did not help us, Mama. You robbed us and called my wife a curse for it.
6 years, Mama. 6 years you let him doubt me.
Victor, please, I am your mother.
And she is my wife. Today I finally see which one of you told me the truth.
The smell of dried fish and melon seeds hung heavy over Ekeoku Market that afternoon. Blessing's hands began to shake behind the counter of her husband's provision shop. Mama Patient stood at the doorway, voice rising above the noise of buyers and sellers, pointing a finger thick with rings at her daughter-in-law. "This shop was full before you came," Mama Patient shouted, loud enough for 3 customers to turn and stare. "Now look at it. Empty shelves, empty pockets. You carry bad luck on your skin." Blessing said nothing. She had learned over 6 years of marriage to Victor that silence was sometimes the only shield a woman had left. She wiped down the counter, stacked the few tins of milk that remained, and waited for the insult to pass like weather. It did not pass. It never did. Victor had married Blessing in a small church in Owerri when they had nothing but love and 2 cartons of provisions borrowed on credit. Back then, Mama Patient had blessed the union with tears of joy, calling Blessing the daughter I prayed for. She had cooked for them on their first night in their tiny rented room, had held Blessing's hand through her first miscarriage, had seemed for a one bright year like the mother Blessing never had. But 3 years into the marriage, when the shop began to struggle to turn a profit, despite steady customers and fair prices, Mama Patience's tears turned into accusations. "Ever since you entered this family, nothing has worked," she told Blessing one evening loud enough for the whole compound to hear. "You carry something evil. Ask your people what they did to you before they gave you out in marriage." Victor, exhausted from long days managing deliveries and worried about debts piling at the bank, began to believe his mother's words more than his wife's tears. He started coming home later. He stopped asking Blessing how her day went. He stopped defending her when his mother spoke. Each silence from him cut deeper than his mother's shouting ever could. The humiliation reached its peak at her sister-in-law's child dedication when Mama Patient stood before the whole gathering, cup of zobo in hand, and announced loudly that the family's trouble started the day strangers married into this house. Heads turned toward Blessing. Someone's spoon stopped halfway to a mouth. Blessing smiled through it, greeted the elders properly, helped serve the rice, and only allowed herself to shake once she was alone in the car outside, gripping the steering wheel till her knuckles ached. Blessing's closest friend, Ngozi, who sold fabric 2 stores away, watched the change happen slowly, the way rust eats iron. "That woman will finish you before she finishes herself," Ngozi warned one evening as they closed up. "You are carrying something that is not yours to carry," Blessing replied, folding a wrapper with hands that trembled from exhaustion, not cold. "He is still my husband. I cannot leave what God joined." "Then open your eyes before your heart closes for good," Ngozi said, and walked away into the dusk. Blessing cried many nights into her pillow, careful not to let Victor hear. She had given this marriage everything, her time, her labor, her loyalty, and watched it slowly being poisoned by a woman who called herself family. There were nights she packed a small bag, sat by the door, and unpacked it again before morning, because somewhere underneath the pain, she still loved the man she had married. But Blessing was not a woman who broke easily. One Friday evening, after closing the shop, she noticed something strange in the cash book. Mama Patience insisted on keeping herself, claiming she was helping since Victor was too busy with deliveries to manage the books. The numbers did not match the goods on the shelf. Stock that should have brought in 40,000 naira had been recorded as 25. The difference, week after week, simply disappeared into nothing. Her stomach turned cold. She closed the book quickly when she heard footsteps, her heart pounding like a drum at a funeral. Blessing said nothing to Victor, not yet. She began keeping her own private record, copying figures into a small notebook she hid inside her wrapper box, cross-checking every delivery, every sale, every naira that passed through that shop. For 3 months, she watched silently, the way a hunter watches a bush before it shoots, careful not to let a single twig snap beneath her feet. Once, Mama Patience nearly caught her writing in the notebook. "What is that you are hiding from me?" the older woman demanded, snatching toward it. "Just counting my own savings, Mama. A woman must have something of her own," Blessing said quickly, sliding the book beneath a stack of wrappers. Mama Patience eyed her with suspicion, but let it go, too consumed with her own secrets to dig deeper into someone else's. That night, Blessing barely slept, certain her cover had nearly collapsed. What she eventually uncovered chilled her to the bone. Mama Patience had been quietly siphoning money from the shop for over a year, sometimes sending cash to her younger brother's struggling business in Aba, sometimes simply pocketing it for herself to fund her own comfort. And every single time the shop fell short, she pointed her finger at Blessing, calling her bad luck, calling her a curse, calling her everything except what she truly was, a hard-working woman being blamed for another person's theft. The pain of it nearly broke her. She thought of her own mother back in Kere, who had warned her gently before the wedding. Marriage is sweet until you understand it is two families, not two people. She thought of the nights she had defended Mama Patience to her own relatives, insisting the woman only spoke harshly out of love. She had defended a thief, and the shame of that nearly swallowed her whole. Still, Blessing did not rush. She knew that accusing Mama Patience without proof would only turn Victor further against her. Her mother's voice had occupied his ear for too long, and a wife's word alone would not be enough to dislodge it. So she waited, and she gathered, and she prayed, even as the insults grew louder, and Victor grew colder beside her. Things came to a breaking point on the morning the bank refused to extend the shop's loan facility, citing inconsistent records and unexplained shortages stretching back over a year. Victor came home that evening with the rejection letter shaking in his hand, his face hollow with worry. "We are finished," he muttered, dropping into a chair. He looked up at Blessing with an emptiness he had never seen in him before, and for a terrifying moment, she wondered if he was about to say words that would end everything between them. Mama Patience, sensing danger, immediately turned her tongue toward Blessing. "I have always said this woman brings nothing but loss. Send her back to her people before she finishes you completely." For the first time in years, something in Blessing snapped, not into anger, but into resolution. She rose, walked to her room and returned with her small notebook clutched against her chest like a shield finally raised after a long retreat. "Victor," she said quietly, "before you decide anything about me, sit down and look at this with your own eyes." Victor flipped through both books, page after page, his frown deepening with every comparison. The handwriting in the shortfall entries was his mother's. The missing amounts were undeniable. The pattern stretched back over a year, matching almost exactly the months his mother had visited her brother in Aba. "Mama," he called out, his voice cracking with disbelief, "come and explain this to me." Mama Patience entered the shop wearing her Sunday wrapper, ready for a Sunday evening prayer meeting, completely unaware that her own son had finally seen what she had hidden so carefully for so long. When she saw the two books side by side on the counter, her face changed. "Victor, what is all this nonsense?" she asked, attempting to laugh it away. "Since when do you doubt your own mother over a market woman's scribbling?" "Since the numbers don't lie, Mama," Victor said quietly. "Blessing's book matches every receipt I can verify. Yours doesn't match anything. Tell me where the money went." The shop fell silent. A neighbor who had wandered in to buy kerosene pretended to study a shelf of tinned tomatoes, ears straining toward the unfolding drama. Mama Patience's voice rose in defense, then cracked under the weight of truth. She spoke of her brother's failing business in Aba, of debts she was too ashamed to mention to anyone, of believing she would replace the money before anyone noticed the gaps. But the longer she spoke, the smaller her excuses sounded against the months of accusations she had hurled at Blessing, accusations she now stood exposed for inventing to cover her own hand. Victor turned to his wife, and for the first time in years, looked at her the way he had looked at her on their wedding day. Not with suspicion, but with shame for every cold night he had given her, every silence he had allowed his mother's lies to create between them. "Blessing," he said, voice trembling, "forgive me. I let her words blind me to who you really are, and I let you suffer alone for things you never did." Blessing did not gloat. She did not raise her voice the way Mama Patience had raised hers for years. She simply nodded, tears finally falling, not from anger, but from the relief of finally being seen after so long in the dark. But the story did not end there, because in Owerri, news travels faster than wind through dry grass. By the following week, women at the market who had once nodded along with Mama Patience's accusations now whispered a different story about the mother-in-law who stole from her own son's business and blamed an innocent wife to cover her tracks. Mama Patience, once respected for her sharp tongue and proud bearing, found herself avoided in church meetings, her opinions no longer sought at family gatherings, her authority in the household quietly stripped away by her own son. Victor did not throw her out, for he was raised to honor his elders even in their failure, but he removed her completely from the shop's affairs, placed Blessing's name officially on the business documents as co-owner, and told his mother plainly, in front of the extended family, that her voice will no longer carry weight in decisions concerning his marriage or his money. "You tried to break what God joined together, and you used my wife's name to hide your own sins. I will care for you as your son, but I will not let you poison my home again." Mama Patience wept that day, not the performed tears she once used to manipulate sympathy, but real tears, the kind that come when a person finally sees themselves clearly and does not like what they see. She had spent years building a reputation for sharp wisdom and respectability, and one notebook unraveled it all in a single afternoon. Her brother in Aba, confronted by Victor soon after, returned what little of the stolen money he could, his own reputation now tied to a scandal he had hoped would stay buried in Owerri. The family that once feared Mama Patience's tongue now spoke of her in lowered voices, the way people speak of someone who has been quietly humbled. For Blessing, the victory was quiet but complete. She did not need an apology broadcast across the whole town. She needed her husband's eyes open, and they finally were. Within a year, with Victor fully behind her, and the shop's books finally honest, the business grew steadier than it had ever been under Mama Patience's hidden hand. Customers who had once whispered about Blessing's bad luck now came specifically asking for her, trusting her fairness, her sharp limbery for prices, her warm way of attending to even the smallest customer who could only afford a single cup of garri.
Ngozi, watching from her fabric store, smiled the day Victor hung a new signboard above the shop, Blessing and Victor's stores. "I told you to open your eyes," she said, laughing. "I did not know God would open them for you so completely." At the next family gathering, the same kind of dedication ceremony where Mama Patience had once humiliated her before the whole compound, Victor stood and asked everyone present to raise their cups. 6 years ago, some of you watched my mother call my wife a curse on this family. Today, I want everyone to know that the woman who saved this business, who kept records when others kept lies, who stayed when she had every reason to leave, is my wife Blessing. Whatever this family becomes from today, it stands on her shoulders. Mama Patience lowered her eyes and said nothing. And for the first time in years, the silence in the room belonged to her, not Blessing. Blessing never forgot those 6 years of silent suffering, but she chose not to carry bitterness into the new chapter Victor was building with her. She had been patient when patience cost her dignity, and watchful when watching cost her peace. And in the end, the truth she had quietly gathered became the very thing that set her free. Mama Patience, for her part, lived out her days in the same compound, present at every family gathering, but no longer feared, no longer obeyed without question, only carrying in the quiet hours when no one was watching the permanent weight of a trust she could never fully earn back. Some nights, neighbors said, she could be heard praying softly on her veranda, asking for a forgiveness that her own actions had made impossible to receive in full. For some hearts, once broken by betrayal, learn to heal but never fully forget. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe, share it with someone who needs it today, and drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.